Hi, hello, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Jessica Duffy. I am the Head of International Events at TAC Events, and I am delighted to be hosting today's session. We have two companies, Felix Schoeller Group and TCON, joining us today to talk about pivoting and utilising lessons learned to build standardised, efficient and scalable global supply chain processes. So a really great session for you guys today. First of all, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you here. This is a live webinar, so we do want to ask you to get involved and to ask questions. Our presenters are more than happy to answer your questions, so do make the most of this opportunity. Before we get started, I just wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. Just to tell you a little bit about who we are in case this is your first time here. So TAC Events run a portfolio of SAP conferences, both in person and digital. We run industry events for example, the International SAP Conference for Forest Products, Paper and Packaging, Energy, Utilities. And we also run line of business and solution-based events as well around topics such as treasury management, billing and revenue innovation management, central finance. So a real varied portfolio, all different shapes and sizes. We also obviously run standalone webinars and also write articles and white papers as well. If you want to find out a little bit more about who we are, you can just see the URL on the screen there at the moment. And you can also find our schedule for next year as well. Back to today's webinar. As I mentioned at the start, we would love for you guys to be involved and to be active. So you do have the opportunity to ask your questions to the presenters. You can do that by using the chat function on the right-hand side of your screen. Type in your questions. Feel free to do that during the session itself. And then whatever time we have at the end of the presentation, we will answer as many questions as we can. If we don't get your question answered, we will pass that on to the presenters and we'll try and get an answer back to you after the webinar itself. And then finally, one common question that we always get is just about the content from the session. So the recording and the slides will be available for you. So you don't need to worry about taking notes. You will be able to watch this back again. We'll email you later this afternoon or first thing tomorrow morning with all of the content, and you can rewatch that as you wish. So that's enough about me and TAC Events. I'd love to just introduce our two presenters for today. So as I mentioned, we have two companies with us, Felix Schoeller Group and TCON. So I'm delighted to introduce Andreas Diekmann from Felix Schoeller Group, who's project lead for North America, and Reinhard Mulbauer, who's the project lead from TCON. So I'd like to hand over to Andreas, and hope everybody enjoys the session.
Thank you for the introduction, Jessica. My name is Andreas Diekmann and I'm working for the Felix Schoeller Group. I'm married. I have two small kids. The one is 6 months old now, the other one is 3 years old. I'm working for the Felix Schoeller Group now since 2003, and I started there in apprenticeship, and then in 2006 I went into the controlling department, where I spent, let's say, most of my time in the Felix Schoeller Group. And in 2021 I decided that there is a change necessary, and that was the point of time when I switched over into the IT department and where I take over the project lead role for the Easy North America project, about which we will talk a little bit during this session. So Reinhard, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, thank you, Andreas. Hello, everybody, also from my side. So my name is Reinhard Mulbauer. I'm project lead at TCON. And I have a long history in the paper and board industry, more than 30 years. And I will give you now a short overview about the agenda we have prepared for our webinar. So to begin, I would like to give the audience an overview of this agenda, and we will start with a brief company presentation of Felix Schoeller Group. Andreas will then go through into more detail about the EASY project. So EASY stands for Unified Order Entry System, but he will explain later what is the scope, what are the challenges, and what are the milestones of the project. And after the learnings from the EASY project, we will introduce either North America and how we adapted the learnings from the German mills. And finally, Andreas will show the key success factors of the project and the result of the project. So, Andreas, please give a short introduction in a few sentences of Felix Schoeller Group.
Thank you, Reinhard. The Felix Schoeller Group itself has a long history. So the Felix Schoeller Group was founded in 1895. So we have about 127 years now history in paper making. We are the #1 market leader in photo imaging and in decor papers. And I will jump into, let's say, a little bit of our product range in the next slide then. The company itself is a worldwide producing company. Today we have 12 production sites. So we have some in North America. Our main production facilities are in Germany, with the headquarter being in Osnabrück. That's where the company itself was also founded. And then we also have production companies in China. For a paper making company, the volume of 535,000 tons is not that big, but we are more in the specialty paper market itself. So what does that mean? So what is the Felix Schoeller Group producing? So we have, let's say, 3 or 4 major markets in which we are in, and that's the ones which you see here on the higher level pictures. So we are in the decor paper market. That is paper which is used, for example, for furniture or flooring. That is our biggest market in which we are in. Then the second major market in which we are in, and that's where the company itself is coming from and what the history is based on, is the photographic and digital printing papers. So when you print today a paper, there is a very big chance that this paper has been produced within the Felix Schoeller Group, as main companies or main customers which we have, like Kodak or Fuji. The Felix Schoeller Group is the company who is producing these papers. So you will not find our names on these papers, but the paper itself is produced from the Felix Schoeller Group, and these big companies like Kodak or Fuji are bringing it into the market. The third market in which we are growing over the last few years is the release liner market. So a release liner is, for example, a tape paper, where when you see tapes or adhesive, you most of the times have, let's say, some paper in the background which you throw away, and the part which you throw away is the paper which can be produced in the Felix Schoeller Group. The fourth main segment in which we are in is the dialyzing papers, which are used for medical application, and that, as you can expect, with having COVID, has been grown over the last few years for us. Then we have, let's say, 3 smaller segments in which we are in. The one is the packaging paper. In the past, lots of the packaging papers, or in the past, it wasn't packaging which has been used, but it has been more films. But as everything is going a little bit greener, companies now try to change from film products to paper product, and that's what we are jumping into the market. The next one is sublimation paper. So sublimation paper is used in the end to transfer something from paper to clothing. So when you see something like a Nike shirt, for example, there is some sublimation on that. So there is the paper is used to transfer printings in the end to the clothing itself. And then the 7th market in which we are in is the non-woven market, which is a more smaller part for us. And then there are lots of other more specialty paper market, but that are more niche products for us as a Felix Schoeller Group.
So thank you, Andreas, for the introduction of Felix Schoeller Group. So please give us some insight into the EASY project. So as I said, EASY stands for Unified Order Processing System, but there is certainly more than that.
Yeah, EASY. Why did we do EASY in the end, and why did we have that project? Well, when we started that project at the end of 2015 or beginning of 2016, the company were facing different main challenges in the end, and I guess that's something which lots of other companies also have had these kinds of challenges. So the one major challenge which we had as a Felix Schoeller Group was that we were using different systems between our segments. So there were different systems between the decor business and the photographic business. In the end, that was leading to different processes within our company and to different master data. So while the one world, the deco world, was talking about material numbers, which were starting with a TC and some digits behind it, the Felix Schoeller world, which is a photographic world, was talking about, let's say, material numbers with 6 digits. So the problem at that time was that we were combining, or we needed to combine these worlds because production was interfering between the different mills which we had, and therefore we had major problems, let's say, to bring rolls from one mill to the other mill because we needed some translation tables in the background that we are matching the material numbers. We needed to make sure that the processes within the company work together, and that were really major issues. And people in the company were spending lots of hours by making sure that the processes which were between our different segments were working. So that was one major issue which we were facing at that point of time. The second major challenge which we were facing was the logistics part. So within 2015, 2016, everybody was knowing Amazon, and everybody knew that you get, let's say, dates when you could expect a product exactly by, let's say, hours or days. And we didn't have that visibility in our whole supply chain. Intercompany processes were making us some problems. And as this was becoming more and more getting a higher valuation within our customers' perspective, we decided that we need to change also the logistics processes and bring in and get more transparency in all these processes. The third major challenge which we were facing, and that is also going back to the individualization everywhere or worldwide, is that customers were asking smaller batch sizes. So instead of ordering 500 tons, customers wanted to order 10 tons, 15 tons, and things like that. In total, this means for us that the overall volume was staying on the same level, but we had an increased number in customer orders, which means in the end that we had to do more input in our systems while we didn't want to increase our personnel. And that means in the end that the productivity needs to be, or needed to be, increased due to a new system, because increasing the HR resources was not the solution for that. It really means that the system needs to have a higher productivity. And with looking to the higher productivity and keeping, let's say, the HR number of people on the same level, we were facing the problem that we had, let's say, an age pyramid, which means that lots of the people in 2015 or 16, or a high amount of people, were at the age of 53, 54, 55, where we could see that the retirement was coming closer for these people. And at the same time, in Germany, we were facing a shortage of skilled workers. And all that together in the end led to the decision to set up a project which was called EASY, and which should take care about a unified way of order entry system. So what was EASY in the end about? We said, while we set up the EASY project, that we need to think more in processes and not in departments, meaning getting rid of, I'm working in customer service and I just care about customer service, or I'm working in planning and just care about planning. We said we need to make sure that people and Felix Schoeller members are really thinking in whole processes, starting at the beginning till the end, and not just looking to their own responsibilities. And that's why we focused in the EASY project on processes and how to set these processes up in total. One major process in which we looked like was the order to cash process. So really starting with the order entry, then going through the planning part, production, then the delivery to the customer, and then in the end getting the cash receipt. The part of that, like I mentioned before, was a plan to produce. We had some kind of difficulties over the past in the planning department, making sure that we are producing the right things on the right machines, getting good visibility into our planning department. And that's why plan to produce was one of our major focuses within the EASY project. To be able to produce in the end, we need to get something from our suppliers. And therefore, a third major process which we have digged into was the purchase to pay. So really creating a purchase order, getting the raw materials from our suppliers, and then paying our suppliers. A fourth major point, which I guess typically in these supply chain processes is not that high on the radar screen, is a record to report. The reason why that was for us one of the major processes in which we looked to was with each document which you create in a system, you also create an accounting document in the end, and you always have some kind of a posting in the background. So we knew that when we were changing these processes of order to cash, plan to produce, or purchase to pay, that this will have a major impact on the record to report part. And there is we decided that this needs to be also one of our focus processes. This does not mean that we didn't look to other processes like store to deliver or data to report. That's also what we digged into and where we looked into these topics. But these were our four major processes in which we looked. What does that mean? If you look now to our system landscape, which we have within the Felix Schoeller group. So we have three major areas. So we have the machine area, then we have the plant area, and we have the group level. On the machine level, we talk about quality data, measuring inline code weights, measuring inline how thick the paper is, and things like that. That was not a major part of our EASY project. Then we have the plan part. So that is all the information about production orders in the end, the volumes which have been produced, the label printing, for example. This was partly impacted because what was the main part of EASY is what you see here in the red quarter, that everything around our SAP system. So the ERP system, the APO, BW, PI, SAP portals, which we are using, and the newly implemented Ticon Mescat interface in the end, which builds the links then to the plant. But this was really the main focus which we had in EASY, really taking care about the processes in our SAP landscape. But we needed to consider also our mill systems, because when we change, for example, the material number structure, we needed to make sure that our mill system in the end can work with the new material numbers. Otherwise, we would have a gap between these two worlds, and that's something which could not happen. So the focus really was around our SAP landscape here in EASY. When we look now to the EASY milestones and to the schedule of EASY, I mentioned that we started in end of 2015, beginning of 2016, in the end with the concept and implementation phase and testing. That took in total about 3 years till the end of 2018. Then at the beginning of 2019, we started with our cutover phase, with having a go live date on, what was it, the 10th of June 2019. I mentioned that we have 12 production mills worldwide. We decided within EASY that we will go live with all our German mills, which are 5 plants which we have in Germany. And after the go live, we had a hypercare phase at about 6 months. During our hypercare phase, we decided based on the problem and on the project and how the project was working, that we needed some kind of an optimization phase, where we went through all the different processes again, and where we looked into the details and said, where do we need to optimize our processes, and where do we need to optimize our master data, for example, or the system itself. And we decided that we will do an optimization phase for 1 year, and that was 2020. Then beginning of 2021, or in the end it was April 2021, we started with the EASY North America phase 1, which was just the decor business for North America. The second phase of EASY North America, and that is something which is happening right now, is our mill which we have in Pulaska in the USA, and that will be followed by a third phase, which is our mill which we have in Anaheim, and then there might be possibly a fourth phase where we add additional functionalities in EASY itself. Yes, that is the whole schedule of EASY. You see a very long time frame overall with about 7 years. And what has happened till now is we have done the implementation in Germany and for EASY North America.
Okay, fine. Thank you, Andreas, for this introduction of EASY. Yeah, I say easy program. It's a program, not a project. So the dimension of the program is quite impressive. And you said that the 5 German mills were introduced first. So what learnings were you able to gain in order to go into the rollout in North America?
Yeah, there has been lots of learnings, Reinhard. To be honest, I think at the end we had about 3 pages of learnings which we have gained through Easy Germany in the end. Like you mentioned, it was 5 mills, and we recognize that with this process thinking, which I mentioned at the beginning, which we wanted to be implemented in the company, that has been a massive change for everybody working in the organization. Not just thinking about what you are doing on your own, but also thinking about what is happening in these steps prior to you and after your job. That has been a massive change, and we recognize that the change management for these kinds of projects is absolutely necessary. So one decision which has been made after the Easy Go Live in Germany is that with these kinds of projects, change management is absolutely necessary and needs to be part of this project. The second major learning was to reduce the complexity. Like I mentioned, we had 2 different system worlds between the deco world and the photographic world. At the same time, we had these 5 different mills, and that all in all gave us a very, very high complexity, which was really tough to handle. And we decided after the Go Live in Germany that for all the future projects, we want to reduce the complexity. So think through what can be taken out for the Go Live of project, and then implement these kinds of things a little bit later on. Thinking about if the process, how we implement it, really needs to be implemented, or if it can be postponed to a later point of time. Because trying to reduce the complexity also helps, let's say, with the change management, and that the changes for the people itself are not too big and not manageable. So that was something which we also considered later on in Easy North America, but I will come to that then. The third learning which we had was to use an agile project methodology. So we decided in the end to use the Scrum method to really be up to date in short frequencies within the project team, and that we don't do, let's say, the old project methodology of having one steering team meeting once a month, trying to get the decisions in these kinds of meetings and then wait another 4 weeks to get your decision. So really being in touch each day or each second day, depending on the process itself, was one of the major learnings which we get out of Easy Germany. The fourth learning was that we want to have, let's say, some kind of a pull effect out of the organization. So learning of Easy was that we said this is no IT project where IT is, let's say, putting over the new processes to the organization, but in the end, it needs to be the organization which is taking these projects and pushing these projects, and there is making sure that the business needs are considered in the project itself. That is something which you will also hear later on about how did we consider that when we set up Easy North America. One thing, and I think that is something which is clear, but it's written down very simple, is that testing is the best thing to be prepared in the end for the Go Live and to make sure that the system is working. So in Easy Germany, due to the fact that we had a concept phase, we spent lots of time at whiteboards, writing things down, how they should be in theory, and how the system should behave afterwards. But only the testing really showed us how the system is behaving. And we had lots of things where we learned that the system was behaving different than we was expecting it to behave. So we said that in all our projects, the testing needs to have a very, very high priority to do it as much as possible. That does not necessarily mean that you have to do the testing in big groups out of 20, 30 or 40 people. It also can mean that testing can be done by each colleague in the end, just going through their process and seeing if these processes are working. The sixth major learnings for us was the importance of master data. So for sure, we knew that master data is important, but with setting up the new EASY project in the end, we also decided that we will implement a master data department within the Felix Schoeller Group who takes care about really all the material master data. And there is, we made the decision in the end to say, okay, we want to bring a very high quality of master data in the system right at the beginning to avoid some problems at the end of the processes. And the seventh and the last learning, which is in the end here under the lessons learned, is that we need enough time for the key players. That is something which is also written down very simple, especially when you talk about small organizations. That is something which is pretty tough to be implemented, because when you have, let's say, a very small organization, like we had it, for example, for EASY North America, taking out key players means that you typically have an impact on the daily business. Nevertheless, when you have these kinds of big projects, you will not be happy when your main players are really divided between the daily business and these kinds of projects, because nobody will be happy afterwards. The daily business will suffer and the project will suffer and nothing will work correctly afterwards. So therefore, there needs to be a clear understanding that key players needs to have a majority of their time in these projects. So we decided it needs to be about 70% for the key players, and that their first priority is these kinds of projects.
That was a lot of learning, Andreas. Thank you. So I'm sure it is very helpful for our audience. Now let's focus on the EASY North America. So please give us a short introduction into the phase North America.
Thank you, Reinhard. As I mentioned, we decided to split in the end our EASY North America project. And that was based on the decision that we want to reduce the complexity. The original plan was, after the go live in Germany, which we did in 2019 or mid of 2019, the original plan was that we will go live in our 3 North American mills at the same time, which would have meant that Drummondville, Anaheim, and Pulaski, which you see here on the left side, would have to go live at the same time. But like I mentioned, there was a clear decision that we need to reduce complexity to be able to handle these kinds of projects. And we made the decision that we will only start with the EASY North America phase 1, which is focusing on our decor business and the mill in Drummondville. So that was one of the learnings which we have considered. The second learning which we did, I mentioned that the organization in North America is very small. So when we talk about, let's say, Drummondville, for example, and the sales organization of Drummondville, and we are talking about, I think in administration, let's say about 25 people. Nevertheless, we said we need about 7 people out of them to be part of EASY North America and spending their major time in that project itself. And we were able in the end to do that. So our main players, which were 3 of them, were able to have about 70 to 80% of the time for the EASY North American project. How were we able to do that? So first of all, we decided that we need to bring the efforts on more shoulders in the end in North America. We were able to hire 3 new colleagues, and we were able to discuss with our BOE also where we can reduce some things. So really stopping some kind of things which we have done for internal purposes, for example. And by that, we were able that we had these 3 major colleagues or these 3 players being part of EASY by 70 to 80% of that time. And that is something which really has worked out well from my experience. Yeah. So overall, we really tried to consider our lessons learned in the EASY North American phase 1 or overall in the EASY North America project.
And what did you gain for the organization at the end of the project, Andreas? So please explain a little bit.
If we look to the success which we had for EASY North America for the phase 1, so we were able, from my perspective in the end, to set up a unified way and unified processes in the end. But we tried, for example, to stay as much as possible in the standards of SAP. But we were able, if we look to the North American business, we are producing the majority of our business for North America decor in Drummondville. In the past, we have created a delivery which was going to the USA. Then we created the second delivery going to the customer. There we were able, for example, to use direct shipments from SAP standards so that we only had to create one delivery, for example. And we have seen lots of other things where easy really help us to simplify the processes and also to make it more simple to work in the system. With having that said, in the end, also with having more simple processes and having processes which are working in Germany, the onboarding of new colleagues are much easier. The overall timing of Easy North America was that we started officially in April 2021 till we were really up to speed. Let's say it was 1st of May, and we had the go live on 1st of March 2022. That means in the end that bringing over all the processes, changing the systems, adapting the systems, only took about 10 months to bring people on board and to make people able to work in the system. And that is, let's say, pretty fast from my experience in the end, because it was not just a rollout, we also had to go through all the intercompany processes, which hasn't been part of Easy Germany at that point of time. So it was not just a simple rollout, but it was also creating new processes for our intercompany business. And making that happen in about 10 months, I think is a pretty good time. And like I said, that makes the whole onboarding of new colleagues much more simple. I talked about the importance of master data, and with having that said, I also mentioned that we try to bring in, let's say, a little bit more efforts at the beginning of our process to make sure that the problems which are occurring later in the processes are not that much anymore. And that is something which overall ends up in less administration. And therefore, the organization has more time to focus on, let's say, their main jobs and not just on problem solvings which are occurring because something is missing in the system in the end. And also based on what I've just said, in the end, this is leading to time saving. I mentioned the change which we have seen in our intercompany processes with using direct shipments instead of going through the USA and then to the customer. We have seen some improvements also when we look to the reporting, where in the past people were spending 5 to 10 hours in the end to create reports which are sent out to customers, where we are now able to do that, let's say, in half an hour to 1 hour. So, which means also there the organization gets some time to really focus on their job, having communication with the customers, discussing something with production, and there is seeing time savings.
Great, Andreas. So you showed us a lot about the processes. Some slides before, you explained the system landscape of Felix Schoeller Group with the SAP system. So could you please give the audience a brief summary of where the Felix Schoeller Group stands now with the new system?
Yes, sure, Reinhard. I think it's very important when you start with these kinds of projects to make sure we're within, let's say, the steering team and within the company about what is or what can be the expectation of these projects. You see here a so-called double S curve, and you see on the one side you see the performance which the system really can bring, and you see within the gray old technology S curve that when I look to our old system, we were, let's say, at the limit of what the old technology would give us from a performance level. Everybody knew the system. People have worked for quite a long time within the Felix Schoeller Group. So when problems were occurring, everybody knew how to handle it in the old system. So therefore, there was a very, very good performance, but there were some limits and some restrictions that we were not able to become, let's say, faster and smarter in our processes and within our performance. With a jump to the new easy world, we see, and that is here the second gray, as we have implemented some kind of new technology. The problem is, it doesn't matter how much you really do the testing in the end. You will recognize that the date of the go live, people will sit in front of their computers and will ask the question, okay, what do I need to do now? They have tested 100 test cases, but then they sit there and what has been just a test is now becoming reality. And there is the performance of the organization. The organization itself is dropped. So you will be lower when you go live with the performance than you have been before. But the major point from my perspective there is you need to be able to get back on the performance level which you have achieved before as quick as possible. When I look to the Easy North America project, I mentioned we had the go live on 1st of March. Within our communication, we said till July or August, the organization will not have the same performance like we had before. And that is something which we have seen during Easy really, or after the go live, that it took some time till people get used to the system and there is getting back to their old performance. We are now in November, and I think we are on the level of what we have seen in the old system, and we have seen that level for, I would say, 1 or 2 months. So let's say somewhere September, October area, we were able to get back to our normal performance level. Perhaps a little bit 1 or 2 months later than we officially communicated. Nevertheless, we are back on that. And now we see the possibility to increase in the end our performance. Like I mentioned, if I just look to the customer reports, just spending, let's say, 1 hour instead of 6, 7, 8 hours for these kinds of things is giving us extra time to communicate better, to have a better processes and things like that. So that is something which we are now really seeing, that the performance is back on the old level, and I would even say that we start to gain more performance than what was possible before. In the end, overall, we have to say this is only working if you work together as a team, because typically the phase when you jump into the new system is no easy, and that's why the word easy in that case does not really make sense. But it's not easy to jump into the new system and have that major change. But if the team wants to go through it and is willing to do that, that is something which is working.
Great explanation, Andrea. Thank you. So thank you, Andreas, for your very good and detailed insights of the EASY program at Felix Schoeller Group. So I'm pretty sure that Felix Schoeller Group makes the best paper in the world. So we at TCON can only make the best SAP system. With our industry experience, we think in terms of end-to-end processes, and we generate added value for our customers. At the center or in the middle of a project execution, we see the users, so with whom we form a team. And this is, for us, I think, a very important issue. And the basis for every solution architecture are our smart TCON solutions in this. And in this way, we create the necessary trust for our customers to generate the added value for our customers. So thanks a lot from my side, and thanks a lot, Andreas, for your explanation, for your insights of the EASY program. And now I will hand over to Jessica.
Perfect. Thank you so much both for the presentation. Really insightful. Lots of information for our attendees to take on board. We do have some questions, so let me just bring up the Q&A panel coming in. So the first question for you, Andreas. You mentioned that one of the learnings was to create time for the key players of the project. One of our attendees would like to know, how did you accomplish this? Seems easier said than done. Any insights there that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, like I mentioned, it's very simple to write that down. In the end, it was lots of discussion which we really had internally. Luckily, we had to say that our BOE was open for these discussions in the end. So people really, or the main players, were going through their daily business, and we nearly decided by each thing they are doing if that is still necessary or not. And if it is still necessary, to say, okay, who can take over this process, this task, that not the key player whom we needed in easy is doing it, and instead that somebody else is doing it. The second part, which has been good for us, that we were allowed in the end to hire 3 new colleagues. But like I mentioned, we were having 7 people or 7 FTE within easy. So this means in the end that not everything has been just done by new colleagues. It's also a major part where we said we stop doing this, and we will come back doing that then later onwards if that is still necessary. So really a good discussion and intensive discussions which we had with our BOE and which we had with the steering team. But yeah, quite interesting discussions all the time.
Yeah, I can imagine. Perfect. Thank you. And then the next question is just asking about, so obviously not all of the Felix Schoeller plants have been covered by the project. Will the others be integrated eventually, was the question. Second question.
Yeah, when we look to the Felix Schoeller group, to the core group in the end, there we talk about the German mills. They all have been gone to the new system. Then we are talking also about the North American, the 3 mills which we have. All the other mills which we have are joint ventures. So we have some joint ventures in China, and we have a joint venture in Russia. And there is not the main focus at this point of time of updating the system landscape. There we have some other projects which are running. It will, from my perspective, come, but that will take some time. But because also there we say we do it step by step, and we don't want to, let's say, to rush now too much. So really now focus is to bring the easy processes to our mill in Pulaski in North America. Then the last step there would be then the Anaheim step. And then talking about Russia and China will be a discussion which is happening afterwards.
Okay, thank you. And you spoke about, the importance of having a team that did get dedicated time on the project. So one of the questions was, how did you ensure that that was the case? How did you lift people out of the day-to-day business? How did you make sure that they, were definitely spending the dedicated time that they were supposed to be on the project? Any tips there?
Yeah. I mean, the good thing, if you talk about project work most of the time, is that there is so much to do that you will short-term recognize, and when people are not taking care about it. Like we mentioned, we worked with the Scrum method in the end, and we had a good tool for which we used for organizing ourselves. So making sure which kinds of tasks needed to be done in that, let's say, sprint. So we always work with a 2-week sprint. And there is, you could see, are we able to, let's say, to find solutions for the task which we had, and are we able to solve the problems which we were facing. And we could see, speaking openly, that especially at the beginning, we had some resource issue where we could see, okay, people were only available by 50%, but we always brought that on the table in the steering team and with our BOE to say, okay, we need to go through the task again and need to decide which task can we stop.
Okay, great. So sticking with the kind of people aspect of the project, the next question was, did you face any intercultural challenges when you rolled out the global project?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting the discussion, especially under the circumstances in which we were working. So within 2021, when we started, we were fully in the COVID situation. So that means also that traveling, for example, was not really possible due to the fact that Canada was very strict with their COVID regulations. So the first time we were really allowed to travel to Canada was in September. So after we have been in the project for about 5 months. Originally, the plan was totally different, where there should be regular travels to sit together to get a better communication and to really have an open communication. We had the luck in the end that the team which we had was very well known. So the Canadian colleagues have worked for quite a long time in the project. We also were, let's say, lucky that the language was no real barrier, because for the Canadian as well as for us Germans, English was not the main language, and there is there was a big understanding always for the other side, to say, okay, if you don't find the word, look it up in French, or we had some side discussions then going on in German, and then we tried to translate it afterwards. But the intercultural exchange has worked pretty well, and it didn't take a long time to get a very, very good atmosphere in all the discussions which we're having. And these kinds of discussions had been very open from the beginning. How did we achieve that? So I, as a project lead, had lots of, let's say, face-to-face discussions with some colleagues to make sure and to gain some trust in the end, that people were really seeing, yeah, it's not that just Germany wants to put over the new processes over what we are doing, but also giving them the feeling, and not just the feeling, making really sure that they recognize whatever they tell us, we will take care about, and we will have discussions about it. So that they really felt that this is their project and that we try to support them.
Perfect. And that leads on quite well to the next question. So you mentioned with COVID, there was restrictions going into Canada. Were there any other effects from COVID on the project that you would maybe want to just kind of touch on for the audience?
Luckily not. So we were really able to, so we had lots of discussions during the project phase. For example, if a go live is possible when nobody from Germany is in Canada on site. Technically, we said this is something which is possible, and we even gave the green light to the steering team to say, yeah, if the travel regulations are staying within the Canadian borders, we would have done the go live. Finally, openly speaking, we have to say that would have been a major issue for us afterwards. We was looking at what has happened after the go live. Being on site has been a major advantage. Having short communication ways, just jumping into the next office, asking some questions, helping if there were some problems, that was a major help for us. So from today's perspective, and that is something which we are now using also for the phase 2, we say a go live is technically possible without being on site, but we would never recommend that, and we will also not do that in the phase 2. So that is something which has been, let's say, a high discussion in Germany, or lots of discussion in Germany. But the mindset and the thinking about that has changed during the go live in Canada, for sure.
Okay, perfect. Well, actually, we've just finished at a good time, so we've only got a couple of minutes left of the session, and we've actually managed to get through the questions, which is great. So doesn't look like anything else is coming through on the chat at the moment. So I think that's probably the end of the questions. So first of all, thank you so much, Andreas, Reinhard. Absolute pleasure to have you with us today. Such an insightful project, and I know there'll be lots to take away for the audience. Such a valuable session. Any final comments from your side before we close at all?
I think one other learning perhaps is that a project needs to make fun. I know it's often some kind of hard work, but the atmosphere in these kinds of projects is very, very important. Laughing when you do some tests, laughing when you let's say have some hard discussions. It's sometimes very difficult and hard to keep that in your mind, but having a good atmosphere within the team and making sure that there really are open discussions, I think, is another key factor of it. And in the end, it needs to make some fun, and that's how we also handle Easy North America.
Perfect, great.
And you can only handle as a team. Very important.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Well, again, thank you so much both for joining us and taking the time to be with us today. We really appreciate it. And a big thank you to our audience. As I mentioned at the start of the session, we will email you the recording and the slides from today, either later today or first thing tomorrow. That will be with you. If you do have any further questions, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to pass those on to Andreas and Reinhard if anything else does come up. But in the meantime, I think we can end the session there. And again, big thank you to everybody for being here, and we'll hopefully see you again soon at another webinar.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.